How's everybody doing? You got to be doing better than that. Come on, the Browns won last week. What are we doing? Felt so good. Oh. So we are in the week 2 of what I'm hoping is a 3-week series. I was going over it yesterday when I was writing it because, man, my schedule has gotten so crazy now. I'm just writing my sermons on Fridays. If I don't have anything going on, then Saturday. So I was like looking at it, I was like, man, I don't know if we can get through this whole thing in 3 weeks. But there's a lot of scripture, so we're gonna run through this. We're just gonna dive right in. And so last week the series is called The Legend of Joe Jacobson, right? And so what happened was a lot of people were like, who on earth is Joe Jacobson? And we don't care actually. But what we found out right last week was that Joe Jacobson is actually what? Joseph, right? The son of Jacob, right? So it's the story of Joseph, and what we found out was that Joseph was, so far what we found out in the story, that Joseph was a kind of a snotty 17-year-old, all right, if you've ever seen one of those before, right? And so he was loved by his father. His father, right, was very obviously loved him more than the others and showed it, okay? And so that doesn't fare well at family gatherings. Like, things don't go well when that's true, okay? And so what happened was, his brothers kind of hazed him a little bit, like brothers do. So they almost killed him, threw him in a pit, and sold him into slavery, right? Just basic kid stuff, okay? And brotherly love. And so that's kind of where we're picking up the story a little bit. And remember, this is the phrase or the passage that we ended on in Genesis 39. It said this. It said, the Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. And Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. And from the time he put him in charge of his household and all of that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything. And so we ask the question, it's like, wait, God's with him? Is that what we're maintaining? That God is with Joseph, who had a great life. Just telling on his brothers, hanging with dad. He had the nicest clothes. You know what I mean? Like, and now he was in a pit. He was hated by his brothers. He's sold into slavery, and we're gonna maintain that God is with him. And yet, even in the difficult places, when we're reading the story of Joseph, we never see him ask, "Where are you, God?" At least he doesn't say it out loud and anyone recorded, right? Right. So we're reading it as like, we don't see that, right? That what Joseph is doing, and it's the question that we want to raise on our hearts. Anytime we have a direction that we're going to go in life, anytime we have to make difficult choices, that we begin asking the question, what would I do? What would I choose? How would I respond if I believed that God was with me? Right? How would I look at each thing in my life and make each decision if I really believed that God was with me? And that's what we're seeing in the life of Joseph, okay? So let's pick the story up, kind of middle of verse 6. It says, now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And let me stop there real quick. Joseph has to amaze you, because he's still concerned about pleasing God in the middle of all this. Because he could have easily made every excuse in the book to go ahead with this plan. Right? He could have worked this out, tried to get away with it, but he's going, I don't want to not only dishonor the person that I'm representing in this household, but I'm still believing God has my back. It says, though she spoke to Joseph day after day, verse 10, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. And one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. And when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and run out of the house, well, let's get to that in a second. Have you ever been in a no-win situation? This is a no-win situation, right? Because poor Joseph, right? He's been through hell, right, to get to this point of his life, and things are kind of looking up. Like, he's a servant, but he's like the best one. He's like top of his class, you know? I mean, that's cool. And here he is, because if he accepts Mrs. Potiphar's offer, it's only a matter of time before they get caught and he's a dead man. Or she gets tired of him and he's a dead man. So what do you do? And when we talked a little bit about this last week, this idea of operating within the truth and doing the thing that you know is the right thing, even if it's not the easiest thing in the moment. And so maybe he's hoping that if he just keeps ignoring Mrs. Potiphar, that she'll just grow tired of him. But it kind of intensifies, doesn't it? It just keeps getting more difficult, and he winds up in this situation. Because listen, probably, I imagine this isn't written in the book. This isn't the first time she's tried to do this with one of the servants, right? It's probably happened before. It probably tries to happen again. So there's this idea, and probably no one's ever told her no, but there's this idea that one of my favorite pastors, Andy Stanley, Charles Stanley's kid, if you follow TV ministers, he posed a question that impacted my life up to this day. And it's such a simple question, or a statement. It's, live the story you want to tell. It's that simple. It's live the story that you want to tell. And I have sat down with guys in the middle of affairs, and this is the advice that I give them. This is the advice that I give a lot of people when they're struggling with the situation that they're in. It's like, I know you're in a bad spot now, and I know that, but what you ought to do, because listen, at some point in your life, someone that looks up to you is going to ask you about this story. They're going to ask you about this part of your life. And you have to decide in that moment whether you tell the truth or you lie. And so if we begin to operate within that story, within the spot, even if it's a bad place that you're at, if we begin to function as if God is for us and begin to live a story that we want to tell, listen, it makes it a lot easier to tell about the hell that you came out of, because you're not in it anymore, right? Because it's like, oh, I strapped on, or I stopped letting people pile things on me that weren't true about me, or whatever it is that's holding you back, or whatever it is that's got you in this hellish place. It's begin today to tell the truth and to live the story that you would be proud to tell someone one day. It's a game changer when you're in a struggle and when you're having a hard time. You tracking? All right, good. And listen, that's all Joseph is doing, right? He's living into each hardship just day after day, no matter what's going on. He's just going, I'm going to live a story that I want to tell. And I'm going to live a story that honors God and honors me. And so verse 14 says, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home, and then she told him the story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. And when his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. God's with this man, you know? It's, this is complete conjecture, but I think Joseph's way of life up to this point saved him from death in that moment. Because listen, Joseph's just a slave. And in any other slave, if you'd attempted to rape the wife of your master in that position, you would be a dead man. And for some reason, he's just like, maybe we'll just put you in the nicest part of the prison with all the king's guards, the king's prison, we'll put you there. And so I think, and listen, this is something that Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 2. Check this out. He says, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that though they may malign you as evildoers, they may see your honorable deeds and glorify God when he comes to judge. And so we claiming, something like, if you're going to live a life that makes waves, make sure you have a life preserver. Does that make sense? Because listen, as Christians, right? I mean, this is what Peter was saying, and this is the way that Joseph was living. It's the more honorable life that you live, the more difficult it's going to be for people to come after you. And when we believe in a God who was raised from the dead, right, and ascended to the Father, and we believe that we should live a life holy and like him, it's going to cause some pushback. And so we ought to live such a way. And I think that Joseph was living this life, and we're going, man, how is he just day after day just doing the right thing? And every time he's in a bad spot, he kind of rises to the best possible place of the bad spot, and then it kind of crashes again. But he just keeps living a life that's truthful and that's honoring to God. And so when his life is on the line, I think it saves him. I think his life saves him. And so here we go again. Check this out. But while Joseph was there in prison, 21, say it with me, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison ward. It's like, God, I am not interested in the favor of the prison ward. You know what favor is? Not knowing a prison warden, right? That's favor, right? It's like, what is happening here? God, what is going on? But I think Potiphar might have had something to do with this too. Like, I got to put this guy in prison. Why don't you give him a good spot? Right? We start to live this life, and we can find favor when we're doing the things in the right manner. And so verse 22 says, so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So jump to chapter 40, okay? Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. And so he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in the master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there's no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." And so the cupbearer and the baker, they tell Joseph their dreams. They're like, here you are. I'm not going to read through it, but there's so much text I got to jump through. But he tells them their dreams. And so in verse 12 it says, "This is what it means." Joseph said to them, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you," verse 14, "when all goes well with you, remember me, show me kindness, mention my name to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews. He didn't mention his brothers. And even here, I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. Here's what I love about Joseph. He's willing to accept his current state of reality, right? But he's not willing to just to give up on the possibility of a future, right? He knows that he's not in a good spot, but he's like I'm gonna get out. Like I'm not giving up, because it would be so easy. Come on, y'all. If we even made it this far, it'd be so easy to just go, my life stinks, and I'm done. And I'm just folding my hands, and I'm giving up because I'm never getting out of this. Every time something goes good, it gets worse. But he doesn't. He just keeps on trucking, keeps on pushing, keeps on doing what because he didn't have to tell him those dreams. You know, he could have just was like, no, get your own dreams. I don't care about your dreams. I don't have dreams. Like, I can't, you look at my dream. It's not working out for me. Like, I'm not telling, he could have done all those things. But he just keeps doing what he believes to be right. And that's the key of this whole story, continuing to do what is right even in the face of difficulty and hell. And but here's the thing I think that's dangerous. And I want to push a little bit on this, and this isn't going to be comfortable, but Joseph says, I don't deserve to be here. And I think we've all said that at times in our lives. We probably, it's probably an easy place to jump to, even to go, I don't deserve this. But I want to be careful that, because notice how long it took him to say this, right? We're pretty a long way into this story and into this Joseph's journey, and we're just now kind of hearing this, I don't deserve this. I think it's important to take a lot of time before we would utter something like that. But to take time to look into our own lives and our own actions and try to find just a little bit of how we might be a part of some of our own suffering. Like, what is it that we can learn from this? Or what is it that I've done? Because listen, if you are in hell and it's some of your own causing, until you find out what it is that's causing that, it's going to be really difficult to get out of it. All right? And so finding what it is inside of you or what it is that you've done, even if it's just a small part, finding that and owning it's going to really help us get out of the situations that we're in. And so the question becomes, why me, God? But not in a complaining way. Not why me, God, but God, why am I going through this? What do I need? What are you preparing me for? What can I be preparing for? What can I take out of this story? What can I take out of this pain? What can I learn? And then what can I use to make my future not so miserable? Right? So make the pains of life have value by using the lessons to move you forward, is what I'm saying. Right? Make the pain at least useful, because what other options do we really have? We can wallow in it, and there's a season for that. I mean, there's a season where you just got to sit in the pain and take it in, but you don't want to, who wants to stay in that season long, right? And so we find what we can within the midst of the struggle, and we use it to whatever God has for us in the future. Are you with me? All right. Now, the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that once again he put the cup in the Pharaoh's hand. Not so great for the baker. Impaled, just as Joseph said with his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Come on. Seriously? Like, it's just, he has to believe God's abandoned him. He has to. It's the perfect opportunity for God to show off. right? It's the perfect opportunity for God to do something in this guy's life to really, like you suffered enough, Joseph. Here's your win. Here's your W. Come on. Verse 1, chapter 41. 2 full years had passed. Pharaoh had a dream. Pharaoh had the same dream. It's not like I had a dream, but it's Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh had the same dream twice in 2 different versions. And so in 41 verse 8, it says this. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. And then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. He's like, yo, I know a dream guy. I know a dream guy. Forgot about that guy. Hopefully I still know the dream guy. Verse 10 says, Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. And each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. And so there's a young Hebrew boy who was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dreams. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them too. I was restored, and the other guy was impaled. You remember. You were there. And so verse 14 says, so Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. And when he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. It's not as great as the regular I have a dream speech, right? I had a dream, and I don't know what it means. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And look, it's like, come on, Joseph, this is your chance, right? This is your chance. Just do what he says. Just do what he's told. And what does he say? I cannot do it. I cannot do it. Like, all you had to do is say you could do it. You know you can do it. Like, he says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer. And so, listen, you got to understand, Pharaoh believes himself to be a god. Like, that part of the Pharaoh, being Pharaoh is being a god. And so Joseph goes to a guy who perceives himself to be divine and says, I can't do what you ask, but my God can inform you of what you need to know. It's like, Joseph, dude, you're going right back to jail, right? Like, you can't say that to Pharaoh. You can't do those. This is not the opportunity to talk about God. You ever hear that? You ever feel that? Like, don't bring God into this right now. Like, you don't have to mention, just do your thing, and we don't have to talk about God, and you be you, and I'll just be me, and let's not discuss all that. There's a tension to manage between living life in such a way that you should use words last. Have you heard that? Testify about God, something like that. And when in doubt, use words or something like that, right? But the idea is our actions should speak louder than our words. But at some point, you still have to point to God, right? You still have to say, look, this is the way Peter says it in chapter 3, 1 Peter 3, verse 13. And I saw this passage, I was like, man, this is a Joseph passage. It says in verse 13, it says, now who will harm you if you are eager to do what is good? But even if you do suffer for doing what is right, sound like someone? Even if you do suffer for doing what is right, you're blessed. Do not fear what they fear, and do not be intimidated. But in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord. And check this. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. Maintain a good conscience, so that when you are maligned, those who abuse you for your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if suffering should be God's will, than to suffer for doing evil. Is that not the story of Joseph? But he says, always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting of the hope that is in you. And so when you are living the Christian life, when you are making waves in culture or you're making waves at work or whatever it is in your community, there's going to be people that go, what do you believe? Why are you doing that? Why do you live that way? And we have to, and listen, I know that can be intimidating, and I know it is such an easier thing to just be like, I'm just going to live the life of a nice person and hope people just follow my car to church, one day. But he says, Peter's like, you got to have something in you to at least talk about what you believe. And listen, so I'm just going to this is what I use, and this is kind of an outline of what I use when I'm discussing these things with people that are skeptical. And so I'll put it on the screen, and you can use this, or you can not use it. It doesn't matter. But here's what I tend to say to folks in one way or another. I get that there are a lot of wild ideas about Jesus in the Bible, right? I just, and I usually go something like, I'm not sure that penguins waddled up from Antarctica either, all right? And I just kind of lead with that generally. I imagine if I had experienced what you have, I would be skeptical too. And that's a reality. Like as we are dealing with people, understand that if you experience the same life that they did, you would feel very much the same way that they feel. And that a lot of how we believe and feel is because of the people that raised us or the situations we found ourselves in. So you're just going, I get that you're skeptical. But here's what I know for sure. Most people's problems with Christianity are problems with Christians, not the Jesus you read in the Bible. And that's the truth. I believe without a shadow of a doubt that if more people would live the way life Jesus laid it out, the world would be a better place. I dare you to prove me wrong. If you ever want to chat more, I'd love to. And that's it. Right? It's really that simple. And it puts the ball right back in someone else's court, and it goes, listen, I'm not being pushy. I'm not trying to get you to show up and say a prayer or change your whole life. I'm just telling you, I believe the way of Jesus is a way better way, and I've looked for other ways. I've looked for other people to follow, and there is no one else. Right? Isn't that what Peter said when Jesus said? He said, "Well, who do they say that I am?" He goes, "Well, who do you say that I am?" Peter said, "I think you're the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus is like, "So are you going to follow these people?" And he goes, "Where else are we going to go? You're the one that has eternal life, the words of life." And it's like, yeah, if you read Jesus, if you're looking at Jesus, if you're following Jesus, listen, there's a lot of wild Christian stuff out there, but the Jesus of the Bible is a very simple, loving figure. And he's not easy to follow, but he's simple to follow. So verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do." And so Joseph is like doubling down on this God thing, right? He's like, can we just, again, Joseph, chill with the God thing. Verse 28 says, "It is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do." That's 3 times if you're keeping track. He just keeps pushing the God card. And so Joseph explains the dreams to Pharaoh, but he doesn't stop there. You notice he only asked Pharaoh. He's like, just explain the dream. Joseph's like, I'm going to explain the dream, and actually I'm going to give you a plan, and you should follow the plan. And so he gives him this plan, and then verse 37, it says, "The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them," check this out, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect will I be greater than you." Listen, we got one more week, and we've talked a lot about how we ought to respond when things are bad. But Joseph is now on top of the literal world. He is second in command of the greatest nation at this time. And so we're going to find out, how do you respond when things are good? When you have all the power and you can respond to people the way that you want to respond to them, because no one can stop you because you're the guy. But listen, they said, can we find someone like Joseph? That's the beginning of this process, or the beginning of the reaching people in our community process. It starts with living in such a way, being in our community in such a way, loving people on the margins in such a way that people go, I'm interested. I'm really interested in what's going on with you and whatever it is that group of people that you're with is doing, and I want to find out more. I mean, that's what the burning bush was. Remember the burning bush? It got Moses' attention first, and then it drew him in. And that's really what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to get people's attention. Let them know that they're loved. Let them know that God loves them, that we love them, that they're not alone, and that we believe Jesus has the words of life. Thank you, church.
May we stand.